I'm Velma Pollard, a retired educator in language education at the University of the West Indies on the Mona campus. I'm presenting two books this morning, Dread Talk, The Language of Rastafari, and From Jamaican Creole to Standard English. It is Black History Month, it is Reggae Month, so I think that both these titles are as relevant as you could want to what this month is about. Reggae and Rastafari are inextricably bound. My interest has not been in doctrine or anything, in the language of Rastafari, but the music of reggae and the language of Rastafari have gone together as long as either has been, and have both gone to all the ends of the earth. I think reggae is represented on every continent of the world. I hope I'm not telling a lie. I think it is. And I thought when I first started working on research in linguistics that the language of Rastafari needed to be understood not as a chance thing with a few people saying I'm on every now and then, but as a structured response to an environment in which the poor black person was the depressed individual, the oppressed individual. What the language did was to call English to live up to its sound, because the language of Rasta is much about sound. And if you're saying I'm oppressed, why is up, up? So I became down pressed. And if something is bad for me, why must it have a positive sign like C? So a cigarette should be really a blingerette because it's not a good thing. In other words, those are that's the kind of content that is involved in what people thought of as just a mishmash. It is really very organized and structured, and that's all that I wanted to convey. So my work, Dread Talk, is really a description of the language of Rastafari as I saw it between, say, the 70s and the 90s. And thereafter, I became interested in how that language responds to interaction with other environments that are not Jamaican. First in the Eastern Caribbean, and then in the Eastern Caribbean, the Anglophone Caribbean, and then in Cuba, where the language of the land is completely different. So those were my interests. Now, Dr. Catherine Shields-Broadbent is going to talk with me about Dread Talk. And after that, Doctors Beverly Bryan and Yawan Lewis Folcom are going to talk to me about Jamaican Creole to Standard English. And before I talk to them, I'll say just a few words about that book. So Dr. Shields-Broadbent, who is also retired, but from linguistics and philosophy at UWI.
Go ahead, please, Dr. Broadbent.
Hi, Dr. Pollard, how are you?
I am fine this morning, madam.
I would like to congratulate you on what has been your groundbreaking work on Dread Talk. You have started off by saying some of the features of Dread Talk that interested you. Are there any others that make it particularly unique? Or that you
Yes, I immediately think of the category that has words which are not English words at all, not words from out of English, that words that put English words in such a way as to make new words, like ataps for beer, which came from hot hops, but with the Jamaican penchant for dropping the H, it became ataps. So the word ataps was, I thought, a significant formulation. Words like that you really had to have some inside knowledge to figure out the meaning. I thought those were highly specific.
You have also spoken about an ongoing process.
Yes.
Which the lexicon of standard Jamaican English has been affected by these lexical items and these lexical structures of Dread Talk.
Yes.
How widespread would you say that is?
More widespread than you know. If you listen, you will tell me when you ever hear the present tense of the verb to tread used in English in Jamaica. Nobody treads anymore, everybody trods. And that was a definite Rasta invention. The Rasta would make a tradition from Trenchtown to UWI. A tradition is not an English cultural something or another. It is a movement, a walking movement. I'm on a trad, I'm on a make a tradition. So now I cannot hear tread as a present tense in anything, no matter who in Jamaica is writing. Gleaner, intellectuals, they all are trodding. Watch it if you think I'm lying. So that's one. I think of penetrate also. I'm going to penetrate this. In other words, I do not understand. So though that meaning for penetrate exists in English, it is not the primary meaning. Yes. To penetrate is in English, you can do it with a sword or with a knife or what have you. But here in Rasta talk, it is primarily is understanding an idea. I think those two are enough for the time being.
Yes, I think so. What about St. Lucia and Barbados and Cuba? How has the language, the Rastafarian language in those places deviated from or complemented a dread talk in Jamaica?
Well, I have here, I have the paper on St. Lucia and Barbados. I'm sure you were at that conference.
Yes,
in Barbados, for example, heights is to understand. It becomes a verb. We have penetrate in Jamaican Rasta. They probably have penetrate as well. But listen to this sentence, the here, I'm an heights that. In other words, I understand it. And you will understand that came from the Jamaican Rasta term heights.
Yes.
Or heights, whichever. And somehow they converted it to a verb meaning to understand. In Jamaica, it's a form of greeting as well as the color red. But it became to understand in theirs. I think I call that semantic extension.
Yes.
And the other one, to sip, is to eat or drink ital food. So, I sip ital food itinerally. That's a quote. So, sip becomes eat. Let me see if I get one from St. Lucia for you.
Let us just move then to the last part while you're thinking about St. Lucia.
No, I have the St. Lucia right here. No, I have the St. Lucia right here where dub means to cook.
Oh, sorry.
I man dub up a yud. I man cook food. I man dub up a yud. And the word draught, which I particularly like, is the St. Lucian term for that vegetable cooked down in coconut milk that Rastas eat all the time. That is draught, And that noun, for example, would not be in Jamaica. And calabash, which they call bashi, as the implement, whatever, the plate, both for eating from and for serving from. The big ones cut lengthwise, they serve the food on that, and the small ones for the individual to eat from, the bashi. Yeah, so you can go on now. Push me on now.
No, I'm just, but I would wrap up by asking you about globalization. For example, we have Rastafarian talk, language as you term it, in these places.
Yes.
Is it spread through the creative industries, for example, abroad? And is it a tool of social protest or a symbol of social identity? What sort of functions does it have?
Two things you're touching on. You say a tool of social protest, and I want to comment on that quickly. An interviewer from Amsterdam or somewhere came to talk to me, and he was saying that Holland has a very good social system. It takes care of its people. Why would anybody want to be Rasta? Since Rasta is for poor people who need, and I was explaining to him that the need for an identity is so much stronger, perhaps, than the need for food, where the food is already given, that a white, well-fed person who feels down-pressed will want to become a Rasta. And everywhere where people have been oppressed, down-pressed, New Zealand, the Maoris, whoever, Australia, parts of Africa, the music of Rasta, going with the words, the lyrics, have gone to these places and oppressed people all over the world have fallen in love with it and claimed it as their own.
Yes.
Marcia Griffiths mentioned last week about going to New Zealand with Bob. That was in the 70s. And I'm telling you what happened down there. I mean, he converted a whole nation almost. People just felt that he was speaking for them. So, and the language goes with the music. Let me just mention, Cuba is a little different. They got it from the music too. As you know, you can turn on the radio in Cuba and hear all the Jamaican music 90 miles away. It's not a big distance. But also, there was a time in the 70s when lots of Jamaican students went to Cuba. And they lived mostly together in communities, whatever. And as many of them were Rastas. And that is really the kernel, the beginning of how Rasta and an understanding of the levity came to them. And I'll just give you one example of what happened to some of the words. You know, we drop this H all the time and we don't realize what's happening. We saw it with heights and ites with the Barbadian. Now, when we got to the most high in Cuba, we were saying the most I. So it was never translated el más alta, meaning más high. It comes to the más yo, or the más I. In other words, the whole business of high has gone completely because it is now one with I. And remember, I is the strongest sound in Rasta. Not only is it the ego, but it is the seeing I. And the sight is more important than any other sense in Rasta. In other words, blind Jarrett or the university, when they didn't have a good feeling about it, was you blind rather than you see, WI, in those days. So, that does that satisfy?
Yes, I think so. And once again, I would just like to thank you for this work, and I recommend it to everybody. One of the great things about it is that it's written in the language that everybody can understand, although it's dealing with some linguistic technicalities. So thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shields-Broadway. Thanks for coming on. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of the day. Keep on trying to get onto the stream so you can hear what's going on for the rest of the day. Thank you. Right.
But can I ask a question about the about Dread Talk?
Yes, you're right.
Yes.
I should say this is Dr. Beverly Bryan.
Beverly Bryan, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of poets touch. They have the cadence of Dread Talk. I just wanted to know, who do you think is the poet, the Caribbean poet, who is most influenced by?
Well, all of them are influenced, but in the poetry,
yes,
definitely Goodison and Dennis Scott.
Yes.
Though Brathwaite was first, he tried it first. Mm-hmm. But I think that he tried it and he was successful, but he could never be as successful as Goodison and Dennis Scott, because they speak Jamaican.
Yeah.
So that when Dennis Scott says, black man came walking, and although the I is over in the next line, you know, he means black man came walking, you know.
Yes.
And when Goodison writes a poem with no Rasta words, but with the entire Rasta rhythm, that the road no paved like any other blackface road. It now have no definite color, and it fenced two sides with live barbed wire. And no look for no mile post for measure you walking, and no take no stone as dead or familiar. For some time you pass a thing as call it stone again, and it's a snake ready to squeeze you, kill you. That has no Rasta words, but the rhythm, the intention, and in that I also put Mervyn Morris's Ode to Dundee, where he begins, me one out there. He will tell you that he wasn't thinking about Rasta, but I contradict him on his own word in a paper because I feel the feeling of the Rasta there, and also because Don Drummond did belong to a section, a group of people who were into Rasta. So if he was talking like Don and stuff, he cannot disclaim Rasta in that, I don't think, or he shouldn't. No.
I agree.
All right, so shall we go to the next book?
Yes.
Yes. Then
which
I
is
would
from
like to-
Jamaican Creole to Standard, and Dr. Yohan Lewis Folcom is going to speak, but I just wanted to say that this book was written in the 80s, first by a New York university, really, and eventually the press took it over.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be very cheap, but the dollar has moved. I notice it's now over $2,000 something, and I am
Really?
amazed. It used to be $500 long ago.
Yeah.
Yes, go
So
on.
my first question is, what encouraged you to write this book?
I had taught the same thing for at least 20 years, and every year somebody came into my class who had never heard the message. That is, that Jamaican Creole is a language. And so I decided, let me just put it down in writing. And I had a sabbatical coming up. No, it wasn't a sabbatical. It was long before. It was some fellowship time, whatever. Or I wrote the book, and then when I had a sabbatical, I tested it. In Papine school, I went had the staff. They gave them time to go through, and I tested it with them. And tested it in another school that asked me to come down. They said, come down to Macedonia and help us. That was Rollington Town School. So I tested it with the staff of those two schools to sort of refine it. And I hoped that people would get the message. But can I tell you the truth? It hasn't worked. People still pretend that this is not a language. And I say a handbook for teachers, and I meant all teachers, because I believe that everybody who is teaching should know that we have two languages running together and should understand the ways in which they're related and the ways in which they're not. All right, so that's why I wrote it.
Well, I'd like to encourage you.
Encourage them to sell it.
It has worked.
It has worked.
I
I know of one teacher, in particular at Mona High School, who used it with her 7th grade class. And she really loves it. She says it works.
Well, I'm
Yes.
glad. And I know that I went to Portland to give a talk, and there was one teacher there who said he met it when he was at training college, and blesses the Shortwood Training College teacher who introduced him to it.